Okay, we're all set. And so we've already talked. He says that if you take this universe as a whole, that it's in perfect harmony, perfect balance, that everything is a cause and everything is an effect, and that there's not a way for you to separate them out without placing artificial boundaries. And we talked a little bit about that last week. And in placing artificial boundaries, that's where we see cause and effect. If we didn't put those artificial boundaries in looking at something, like if I hold this up and I drop it, it's like, oh, look, there's cause and effect. Gravity does it. And I can have this little bounded place, the place where I let go of it, the place where it lands on the ground. And that's my story of cause and effect. But if you broaden that a little bit, you find out that the cause is also the effect of something else. And the effect of something else is also the cause of something else. So everything, there are no causes and effects. Those are illusory. There are cause effects. Everything does both. And so everything in the universe is as it is because everything in the universe is as it is. And that can come down to your particular. Your moment is as it is because everything in the universe is as it is. If you change anything, it ripples all the way through, potentially. So it's this idea, and that's why when you see the whole, you see the perfection of the moment. And you can only see that as a realized soul when you're not attached to a singular, particular perspective, but you sit in the isness of it all. And that is when we see the perfection of the divine. That's where we understand that this moment is exactly as it is. And we only see difference of that, or we only see things to argue about when we grab a particular out, when we take it out of its context without knowing the rest of its environment. And so that's why this world, when we say God is everywhere present and always perfect, we're not going to see that until we know what we are. Because as long as we remain a particular, we're going to be on the waves. And sometimes we're going to be high and sometimes low. Sometimes here, there, sometimes there, and we're not going to get a good, accurate reading on the nature of reality. But when we're able to know the whole spontaneously as ourself, that's when we see the perfection. So that's why I tell people, this perfection of the moment that we talked about, that God everywhere present and always perfect, that's never going to be able to be seen by a body, because the moment is never going to be perfect for a body. And that's not going to be able to be seen by a mind. That moment is never going to be perfect for a mind. But to the indivisible spirit, the self within, the moment is always perfect for that. And so that's why, our freedom is utmost, to find that space. So he says, but why worry so much about causation? What do causes matter when things themselves are transient? Let come what comes, and let go what goes. Why catch hold of things and inquire their causes? He's just asking a simple question. It's like, why get tied up about what caused it? He says, live in the moment with no resistance to it. Let it bring to you what it brings to you. Your responsibility remains the same. Create gold out of what your moment is, which is a metaphor for create love out of all the things that you have available to you in this moment, and your life will be at peace. Create love, create wisdom in everything that you have in this moment. Use all of the possibilities for that. And if we do that, then we act according to nature, and we'll find that harmony. We'll sense that harmony. We'll become a part of that whole, instead of viewing ourselves as being different. When you don't like what's happening and you push against it, that's what causes you a feeling of separation. When you don't think and you just kind of flow in the moment without any awareness, that's just dullness. So what we're doing is looking for a full awareness of the moment that takes everything in and responds from its nature as love and wisdom to create such things, or to put out those sorts of outgoing ripples, like a rock in the pond, so that, because of your life, peacefulness prevails. Because of your life, love prevails within your world. We all live in a personal universe. And so this is how you change the world, and why Gandhi would say, be the change you want to see. Because in your world, it will change accordingly. It will harmonize. All right. Let me go ahead and mute everyone here real quick. All right. So the questioner says, well, from the relative point of view, everything must have a cause. And that's true. As long as we're in the mind and taking the mind as our reality, everything has to have a cause, because everything is relative, meaning everything is related to each other. And that's how the mind works, right? We talk about that quite a bit, because it's fairly important to know the tool that you're looking at the world with. It helps to explain a lot if you recognize the nature of the mind. In the nature of the mind has past, present, future in the form of memory, isness, and projection. And the mind has relationships. Everything is related. Your mind stores all of its memories and all of its sensory experience in a relative way. It's a relational database, an RDMS, and it puts this thing over here, and then learning is about finding what that piece of information's relationship is to all of the other things in the mind that are within a one thought span, I guess. So it gets the relationship. So for you to have something in your mind, for you to be able to conceive something in the mind or understand something, it has to have three components. It has to have the subject, it has to have the object, and it has to know the relationship between the two. And this is very interesting, because one of the things that's said about samadhi, or realization, is that triad collapses into a singularity. And so all of the triads, past, present, future, subject, object, relationship, all of those things collapse into an isness where they're all implied. And the way to think about that is like Sri Nisargadatta says about this moment. He says all of the past can be traced from this moment. That this moment is as it is, and the whole past is indicated in it, and the whole future, all possible futures, can be projected from it. So the only necessary thing, the only thing that contains all of it, is this moment that we inhabit all the time. And so that moment, this moment, and all that it is, thou art that. That's your realization. That it's not separate from you. There are no pieces outside of you. That it is all part and parcel of a singular wholeness that is perfection, that is freedom. So from the relative point of view, everything must have a cause. Of what use is the relative view to you? Maharaj asks. You are able to look from the absolute point of view. Why go back to the relative? Are you afraid of the absolute? Questioner, I am afraid. I'm afraid of falling asleep over my so-called absolute certainties. For living a life decently, absolutes don't help. When you need a shirt, you buy cloth, call a tailor, and so on. Maharaj, all this talk shows ignorance. Questioner, and what is the knower's view? Maharaj, there is only light, and the light is all. Everything else is but a picture made of light. The picture is in the light, and the light is in the picture. Life and death, self and not self, abandon all of these ideas. They are of no use to you. So we're looking at a couple of things here. One is this admission on the part of the questioner that we're afraid of this absolute isness, this lack of cause and effect. And why is that? Where does our fear come from? Well, Vivekananda says that our first fear, the primary fear, comes the first time we saw the universe as other than ourself. As soon as we saw and had the idea of other, we were overcome with fear because we were tiny in comparison to that other. We are utterly at the whim of the other. When the sun explodes, when the moon decides to fall in the ocean, all the good movie themes for for Hollywood are basically all of the things that we're really afraid of. And this fear is primal. It's one of the white noises that we long ago blocked out. We don't realize how fear motivated we are, which is why fear is such an effective manipulator. By during periods of history, by organized religion, putting you in a sense of fear puts you in a position of slavery for getting rid of that fear. You see it in politics, this constant fear mongering. Oh, if you pass this law, this is going to happen. Oh, if we don't, act against this country, this is going to happen. It's always framed in a fear. And so getting rid of that fear is one of the primary points of spiritual life, being free from that fear by understanding. So that's this knowledge that we have to come to. The ego employs fear to maintain its existence and its control over you. It's always you who are going to solve the problem, right? And by you, I mean our idea of ourselves, the ego, our egoism. And the ego uses our own experience to promise that salvation. And the ego likes things to be difficult, because it can pin it on, coming as the white horse hero. I'll save you from that. And so this ego exists by manipulating this fear. Oh, my gosh, if I realized God, how would I feed myself? Oh, if I lived like that, how would I pay my rent? All these things that ego has taken responsibility for and holds over your head and binds you. If you hate your job, but will you quit? Oh, no. Why? Because you're afraid you won't find a better one. You're afraid that you'll get into a situation. And so fear is the driver of delusion, one of the major drivers of delusion. So we have to become aware of that. And when we feel that fear or that apprehension inside, we need to offer that, let go of it and move on and see that there's no reason for fear. Because look at Ramakrishna, an enlightened soul. Did his life fall apart when he realized God? Did he have to move out of the temple because he, couldn't pay rent? It's quite the opposite, actually. Look at the life of Jesus. Did it fall apart because he was realized? Absolutely not. It was a life of such beauty and such magnitude that 2,000 years later, we're still talking about it. The lives of Krishna and Rama and Buddha. You see, so our fear is needless. If you realize life is awesome, life is ecstatic, as a matter of fact, and so to know this is our antidote to the fear that binds us, that keeps us small and keeps us as beggars. So there is only light and all light. Everything else is but a picture made of light. And this is what Eckhart Tolle went through. He saw that everything was light, and the nature of this light was love, that light and love were synonyms. And his life also didn't fall apart. Although, interestingly enough, he spent a month, it might have even been 6 months, just sitting on a park bench all day in ecstasy, just thrilled by the love that he was just seeing in front of him. Everything, the blooming flowers, the gentle breezes, the people walking by the park bench, he saw it all as manifestations of divine love. And he couldn't see the subject-object relationship. He could only see the light, of which everything is composed, of which everything is a story. And so that is our freedom. That is enlightenment for us. And so it means when you look at the world, see light. You could start easier. You could start playing a movie on your television or your computer and just sit there and desperately try not to get caught in the story. Keep yourself aware that you're just seeing colored pixels on a glass screen. That is the same way that we want to practice living in the world. And nothing will show you how difficult it is other than that, to watch a movie without getting caught up in the story, without believing the images to be people and the people to be relationships and the relationships to be stories. Instead of letting the mind provide all of that made up nonsense, see it as it is, just a bunch of colors, dots on the screen, changing constantly for no purpose. And see if you can even manage to do that for a split second, to actually see it that way, to see the computer screen, even now that we're looking at, as just being a collection of colors, a collection of light. So this is why sometimes spiritual life is a challenge, because we're so accustomed, so habituated to interpreting a screen. It wouldn't be that way for the first viewers of a movie. They had to be trained how to watch a movie, how to see a movie. As a matter of fact, one of the earliest recordings of a movie, it's quite funny because one of the first movies was a picture of an oncoming train. And it was shown on the screen in that little theater. And the train came right at the auditorium. And when it got right to the camera, everybody screamed and cleared the center of the room because they thought that train was coming through. So you see, they had to be trained to see and understand the nature of a movie in order to become expert movie watchers like we now are. And now we have to try and reverse that process. We have to try and become expert movie non-watchers so that we see it and understand its nature and don't interpret all the rest that causes so much trouble, so much suffering in ourselves. And you see, he ends that sentence here. Maharaj says, they're of no use to you. So from a spiritual enlightened soul's perspective, your story of ego, your story of cause and effect, of past, present, future, are of absolutely no use to you. All the uses that you employ it for are imagined on your part. You imagine your life would fall apart if you weren't in charge of getting your body out of bed for work in the morning. You imagine that life wouldn't go on because you think you're the body and you're the mind. But your body and mind are just vehicles of your karma. It carries on like an automaton. It'll carry on whether the ego presence is there or not. The life presence will manifest, but the life presence is neutral. It's pure love, pure wisdom, pure existence. And it will, that's all the body mind needs to get up and go to work. It just needs an awareness of itself. And then all the karma, that wheel of samsara will happily just roll down the hill. And if you're an enlightened soul, you can just watch it roll down the hill and not be affected by it. If you believe that you are the body mind, then you're doomed to tumble down that hill with your body mind, bouncing all over the place. So our questioner says, well, from what point of view do you deny causation? From the relative, the universe is the cause of everything. From the absolute, there is no thing at all. And Maharaj says, well, from what state are you asking? Questioner, well, from the daily waking state in which alone all these discussions take place. Maharaj, in the waking state, all these problems arise, for such is its nature. But you are not always in that state. What good can you do in a state into which you fall and from which you emerge helplessly? In what way does it help you to know that things are causally related, as they may appear to be in your waking state? A very interesting perspective there. You're only in your waking state half the time. If that. Actually, if we actually defined it as being aware of our moment, there's probably 3 minutes a day where we're actually awake and seeing things, as they are. And so you see, what use is this cause and effect to you? You're not always there to manage them if they were important. You're out of it completely, 8 to 10 hours a day. And so what then? He says, you're not always in that state. What good can you do in a state in which you fall and from which you emerge helplessly, that you can't even control that? It's sort of just part of being. So how responsible can you actually be? In what ways does it help you to know things that are caused? Know that it's a choice. You're subjecting yourself to causation is a personal choice, right? Karma yoga does away with it simply by saying, don't expect a result, or don't look to the result of anything that you do. You're entitled to the work, which means what? You're entitled to the moment, not to the effect, not to the results. And so, see, karma yoga even is jnana yoga underneath. It's talking about it in a different way, but in a very practical way. How do you act in this way of living in a world with no causation? Well, the way that makes you look is exactly like karma yoga says. You stop doing things for their result. You do them for the thing themselves, and you do them as an act of worship, which is what? In response to the love of your nature, the isness of your being, the wisdom of the moment contained in the moment. And you put away all the rest, and you practice non-resistance. You don't value things that come at you. Just take them and let your nature create love and wisdom out of them. Don't pick your ingredients. Take all of them. Use them all. Questioner, the world and the waking state emerge and subside together. Maharaj, when the mind is still, absolutely silent, the waking state is no more. Right? The waking state is no more. That's a very interesting statement. Actually, it's got a lot of very interesting axioms or theorems, proposals that can come out of it. So let's see, let's look at this again. When the mind is still, absolutely still. Okay, so in that there's no time. That's one of the first things you notice when the mind is still, is that there's no passing of time. If the mind is absolutely still, there's no past and future, because that's all held in the mind. There's no relational information. There's no boundaries. Right? That's why they know that the self is infinite, that we all have the same self at the end of the game. So that sense of infinity is there. And so even this waking state, because what is the waking state? The waking state is in part egoism, taking control of things it doesn't control, which is why we suffer a lot, because things happen that we didn't want to happen. Things occur that aren't helpful or that are painful, and we're subject to them. So you see, this waking state itself is a delusion that you are always the observer. Always the observer. And since all of these things, all objects are merely thought, they resolve to just a thought, you can see that what is it to change one thought into another? What actually is done? Nothing. You spent all night building a house in your dream. You wake up, there's no house. You did nothing. You affected nothing, because all of your whole world was a world of thought only, in your mind only. And we'll see one day that the nature of this waking world is the same, that it is all mental, that it's a dream. And people always say, well, it's a state remembered dream, but it's not necessarily, because even if you fell asleep last night and your friends decided to prank you and to silently pick your bed up and put it on a plane and fly you to somewhere out in Irkutsk, somewhere, and put you in a tent on on a plateau and you wake up in the morning, everything would be different. Everything would be different. But what would your mind immediately start working on? Tying those ends together, creating the narrative, making sure that the narrative continues so that you get a set of causes that put you where you are, right? And so the mind immediately, when it wakes up in the morning, begins the process of tying together these strings to the day before to make sure that continuity is maintained. But your mind would do that regardless of whether it was true or not. It would come up with an explanation for why you are where you are and what you are, regardless of whether it even had the information for it. It would just fill in the gaps with its own stuff. That's one of the functions of your mind. It keeps us bound. It keeps us in the limited. He says, the world and the waking state emerge and subside together, the questioner says. When the mind is still, absolutely silent, the waking state is no more. Questioner, words like God, universe, the total, absolute, supreme, they're just noises in the air because no action can be taken on them. Very interesting, because he just told on himself. Look at that. Do you see what he says there? They're just noises in the air, which is the same thing as saying they're just thought, right? They're just waves. They're just vibrations because no action can be taken on them, right? So he's saying that about all the things that are real there, God, the universe, the total, the absolute, the supreme. But when we realize that the same thing is true of all of our actions, that everything is just noise in the air. Everything is just vibration, right? That's why we talk about dream, because about a dream, we don't argue about it. Waking state, we argue about a little bit. It's not, objects aren't just there because I can touch them. Well, if you think about it, in the dream, you can touch things also. In the dream, you can pick up rocks, you can throw them, you can catch a bird, you can get hurt. All those things, the dream provides all of the same cues of reality. And yet, for some reason, we subset it as a separate thing and leave it unexplained. So this notion, so he says, so all these big words that you're using to explain this perfection, your perspective as an enlightened soul, he's saying they're just words. I can't make any meaning out of them. And Maharaj says, you're bringing up questions which you alone can answer, right? Because you live only in your own world, in your own mind. We've said that many times. We live in a mind and not the world. And so many times the questions we come up with are based on all that we believe, whether it's true or not, all that we believe about the world we've created for ourselves to live in. And so you see, this is a good thing to know, that ultimately all questions are like that. They're from our world of ignorance. By necessity, a question comes from ignorance. What's the point of a question that doesn't come from ignorance, right? And so as long as we hold on to our world as our reality, all of our questions are based on an ignorance. And the weird thing is that we expect answers from the world that's built on ignorance, right? That's how we want our questions answered. And what Maharaj is saying here, he's like, there aren't answers to those questions in your world. That's why your world is ignorant. These questions come in through the back door. They don't come in through your five senses. They don't get processed by your mind, which is creating in this moment your world and your experience of it. He says the answers to these questions come from what you are. They come before the mind, before the process of sensing. And those answers are of a world of knowledge, are of the world of isness. They're not partial, and they're not relational, and they're not referential. They are this moment, part and parcel, one without a second. So the questioner says, well, don't brush me off like this. Don't blame my questions on my world. What can I do with that? And that's exactly right. He says, don't brush me off like this. You're so quick to speak for the totality, the universe, and such imaginary things. They cannot come and forbid you to talk on their behalf. I hate those irresponsible generalizations, and you are so prone to personalize them. Without causality, there will be no order, nor purposeful action will be possible. Maharaj, do you want to know all the causes of each event? Is it possible? So he's saying his ego is telling him without causality, no good action can happen. And yet they do. Yet they do. Look at Jesus. He had no sense of causality. When he went and fed 7,000 people out of a bag that contained 2 fish and a biscuit. Where's the causality in that? Where's the causality in that? When that old woman in one of the Hindu stories gets that pot of oil from Shiva. Let me step out on the stage and embarrass myself here. That pot of oil that never ended. She could continually pour out of it, and someone else got a pot of milk that way. But all those things are demonstrations of this truth, that if you can let go of this idea of causality, if you can let go of this law that you've created for yourself by living in mind, which has told you that it's that way, because that's the way the tool works. If you can break that, then you can say to this mountain, get up and throw yourself in the sea. And Ramakrishna, in the form of Jesus, said, I tell you the truth, verily this mountain will get up and throw itself in the sea. Look at Ramakrishna when he was standing there and he wanted to build his fence around the Panchavati. All he had to do was have the thought, and suddenly all of the tools, all the nails, all the wood, all the rope, everything necessary for that fence washed up on the shore of the Ganges, right there at the Dakshineshwar temple. Where's your cause and effect in that? You see, you're free by nature if you will let yourself be free. If you can pull yourself out of your addiction to thinking, if you can pull yourself out of this addictive nature of mind to constantly go to mind and thought for answers, instead of the infinite intuition of being that's within you, that contains everything the mind would ever come up with, and is already known by anything who's listening to the mind, then you would be free. Hold this possibility in your mind. Hold it there. Know it to be the greater truth, and go forward. But just knowing that it's there, knowing the possibility that mountains can be thrown into the sea, that 5,000 people can be fed to fullness on a fish. Live in that world. Live in that world, because that's the world you do live in when you're free, when you're not bound. Did someone have a question? Okay.
Yeah, Swami, yeah. It's Tom. So I want to. There's a joke they used to play on college students, where I went to college, and you'd be a pledge at a fraternity, and you'd fall asleep on a bed, and I guess you had to be a heavy sleeper because they would pick the bed up, and they would bring you out to the green, and every house looked like every other house. So you're surrounded by this big circle of houses that all look the same. So you'd wake and you wouldn't know where you were at all.
Right.
And you were talking about causality, and if your friends, you went to sleep and woke up somewhere far away, Are
you there? What caused that?
Yeah.
Did you fell off the end there for a moment? Did you say something else after waking up on the quad?
Just that this idea of causality, that you would, you actually would wake up and have no clue of how you got there and where to go next. And you'd have to probably go knocking on every door because you really don't necessarily remember I guess you'd know the number, but it would be a bit of a puzzle for you.
Yeah, most definitely. And that's the point, is that your mind would immediately get busy coming up with the cause so we could understand the current and then project a future. What am I going to do about this? Where do I take my bed now? What do I do with these blankets? That kind of thing. Yeah. And but the thing is that all of that could happen without the necessity of cause. It's like the cause isn't necessary for it. It would be an interesting thing, because you would still wake up and you'd still have to go get some food, all those things. Anyway, there's no escape from if we take an example out of the flow of cause and effect and then want to make it free of cause and effect. It's going to be a rather big exercise for us to do, because we've never taken our awareness for a moment hardly out of cause and effect. So it would be a completely new way of experiencing a moment, to have no concern for a why and no concern for a where, that you would just simply take the reality of whatever is, accept it, and follow the inspiration within. Just follow the spontaneous promptings of what you are, which will probably do something very similar to what it does anyway when the mind thinks it's in charge, when the mind thinks it has an explanation. Because it's not that you would act differently. The wheel of samsara still rolls and the body mind would still do. But you, as an experiencer of it, would have no horse in the race, as it were. You would just be. And you would see the light as love. You would see everyone as a manifestation of that beautiful isness of which you are one with. And there would be no trouble. There would be no fear. There would be no alarm. And it would go on.
A lot of people do that. They get up and leave and never come back.
Mm.
There are people who do that. Lots of them.
Yeah. No, there's I the yeah, it is true. Some people live like that. Thakur lived like that. Holy Mother, Vivekananda. Look at Vivekananda. He traveled around the world without a plan. Didn't know where he was staying. Didn't know really where he was going. Didn't have the address of the Parliament of Religions. So he just sits down on the street corner. He's like, well, I'll just sit down and be quiet. That's what I'm going to do. And just by chance, he sits down in front of the house of the wife whose husband has organized the parliament, and everything is taken care of. Case in point, right? Case in point. You can see in him, and actually in all these great ones, because they all have to have enough ignorance in order to have a body mind, so they can teach, so they can show us these things. But you get that weird mix in their life, because they'll act within causation also, although they don't often plan, which is interesting. And then crazy things, amazing things happen with no cause for them, because again, that's the illusion. So this guy is upset. Don't brush us off. Don't tell me ridiculous things like what we're talking about, because from our normal mind, addicted to thinking, addicted to time, space, causation, addicted to naming everything as a cause or an effect, we can't take this. We're like, this is impractical. You can't live a life like this. Where would my paycheck come from? I would leave all kinds of things boiling on the stove and, go off and forget all about them. What would happen? And so Maharaj's first point of reference is to remind you, well, how much do you actually know about the causes and the effects that you think that you're experiencing? How much do you actually know about them? How many do you know? Chances are, one, maybe two, possibly. But out of those one or two or three, your mind can project an entire day for you, a full agenda for you. But how many of them do you know? And how many can you count on? If you're a bus rider, if you get rid of your car and start riding the bus around, you get your first adjustment to life is understanding that bus may or may not be there, and it may or may not be there on time, it may or may not be crowded. All of these things you begin to accept. And so what do? Well, you leave a little bit earlier for the bus stop, you get there, you wait a little bit longer, you adjust your life. You find a house that's at one end of a bus route and a job that's at the other end of the bus route, and you start living differently because you understand you're not fully in charge. And so you have to start making allowance for that. And spiritual life is exactly that. We're going along trying to train ourselves into an allowance. Don't get upset when things don't go your way. Accept the moment as it is. Don't push against it. These are all methods of learning to live freely. So do you want to know all the causes of every event? Is it possible? Of course it's not possible. Maharaj, or questioner, I know it's not possible. All I want to know is if there are causes for everything and the causes can be influenced, thereby affecting the events. Maharaj, to influence events, you need not know the causes, right? Even if you act at all in this moment, whether it's in the flow of cause and effect or not, you're affecting cause and effect in the flow. So he says, to influence events, you need not know the causes. What a roundabout way of doing things. Are you not the source and the end of every event? Control it at the source itself. Control it. You are the moment. You are the reality. You are the creator of the universe you live in. You are that which observes all of it. And the source is this moment. Nothing in your past came anywhere but from the present. Nothing in your future will come anywhere but from the present. The present is your only point of being. It's the only thing you can affect. And how wonderful life becomes when you bring your perspective down to the moment. How utterly in charge of your life you will seem to be. How much easier it is to accept it. And love is what you become aware of. Love as this beautiful and solitary motivator in this diverse world of constant change, unrepeating. Love is the source of all of it, that infinite goodness, that infinite beauty, that infinite divine. And so to bring it down to the moment, yes, you love. Plant with an awareness of love, you will affect the entire universe. If Vivekananda says, if in your life you are able to do a single thing with purity, an absolutely pure action, an action that has absolutely no sense of gain in it, no sense of result. If you can do just one action like that, you'll have your realization, he said. So just that could become your practice in and of itself right there. That could be your practice of your awareness of the moment, to try always to perform that one act that had not one strand of selfishness in it at all, that had no line of relationship to the ego. And if you can do that even a single time, Vivekananda says you'll have your realization. So that could be a practice. Oh, that'd be karma yoga, actually. To influence events, you need not know the causes. What a roundabout way of doing such things. Because you can't, in this moment, you can't control the causes. They're written in a past, the imagined past. So what does it help to know what causes it? Because you can't control cause, right? You can only be a cause. Which again is an illegal thing to say, but it's true within our relative sense for where we are. It's a working idea. I know it is not possible, right? So to influence events, you need to know the cause. You do not need to know the causes. What a roundabout way of doing things. It doesn't even make sense to be aware of causes because you can't do anything with them. Are you not the source and the end of every event? This is the important thing. The moment is always the beginning and the end of everything. Because again, we break all kinds of rules even by saying that. But the moment, what he's saying is that everything is in the moment right here. Everything that you can possibly affect is in the moment, and by taking charge of this moment, being aware of this moment, is the only way that you become the navigator of the change, as such. And so don't go into a bigger mind story than necessary. Control it at the source itself. Control yourself. How do we control ourselves? We control our mind. Don't let your mind wander. Bring it back to its silent point when it's not necessary. Don't think for the sake of thinking. Don't think just for the noise and the entertainment of thought. When the mind is not necessary, be quiet and still the mind. If you can still the mind, then you have controlled all causes. And you've also controlled all effects. So that's the necessity. Control the mind, and you control everything. Questioner, every morning I pick up the newspaper and I read it with dismay at the world's sorrows. Poverty, hatred, and wars continue unabated. My questions are concerning the fact of sorrow, the cause, the remedy. Don't brush me off by saying that it is Buddhism. Don't label me. Your insistence on causelessness removes all hope of the world ever changing. This guy loves the hole he's sitting in, for sure. Maharaj, you're confused. You're confused because you believe that you are in the world and not the world in you. Who came first, you or your parents? You imagine that you were born at a certain time and place, that you have a father and a mother, a body and a name. This is your sin and your calamity. Surely you can change your world if you work at it. By all means work. Who stops you? I have never discouraged you. Causes or no causes, you have made this world and you can change it in this moment without cause. Do something motivated by love from within. Let yourself be the cause. Let your nature be the cause, not the senses, which cause the thoughts, which cause the states, which cause the action. Cut all of that out, so it's not this convoluted, insensical way of doing things. Take it in without resistance and let what comes out come out. Your nature will respond. There's nothing else necessary. No other thought or calculation necessary. Right? Because the world is in you, meaning this is your universe. Your world of thought is the world you live in. Right? Everything comes from inside. There actually is no outside. Sri Nisargadatta says in another place, those things which you know fully, you source inside, you put them inside you. Those things that you don't know fully, you place them outside of yourself. And that's why the world's created in ignorance, because everything outside of ourselves we don't know the nature of, because that's how we did it. That's why we view them as outside of ourselves. Right? So we live in ignorance, quite directly, quite frankly. And so, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because in reality, you are the source of that world. It's within you. You are not in it, which means its cause and effects are not what are affecting you, the self. You cannot be affected by a dream. No matter how many times that person in your dream shoots you, you're going to wake up in the morning. The dream can have no effect on you. Cannot be wetted, cannot be burned, right? These things we know from the Gita. This world is within you. Questioner, a causeless world is entirely beyond my control. Now you see, he betrays right there. What's the point of causality? The ego maintaining control. You see, because he says it right here. A causeless world is entirely beyond my control. And as an ego self, we can't have that. No. I'm in charge. I determine what I am. Maharaj, on the contrary, a world of which you are the only source and ground is fully within your power to change. What is created can be always dissolved and recreated. All will happen as you want it, provided you really want it. So we have to have that singularity of mind. We can't just go and change the surface thoughts, the temporal thoughts. You know, we have to break the ignorance all the way down. We have to completely pull out of mind, right? It's the difference between jumping into a pool and from the position of being in the pool, try to still all of the waves. It's a sense of panic. Well, that's how we live. We've jumped in the pool and now we're trying to control all the waves around us. But in spiritual life, we're told, look, if you want a calm and peaceful world, get out of it. Put yourself up on the side of the pool, and the waves will calm of their own accord. The noise will calm of its own accord. So this is the instruction. All right, we'll stop there with that question. Well, I thought so. Okay. Let me